Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the city in which we live. Guide us this evening as we make our decisions. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
This is a special call meeting of the Newnan City Council, August the 30th, 2022, for two reasons. One, the discussion of the 57 East project, and the second is an executive session that we'll go into after our discussion of 57 East. It is, let me just say, it's great to see so many citizens who've come out on a rainy night to talk about this very important project and opportunity that we have so close to our downtown area. And I hope that as you hear tonight, the opportunities as we go through and discuss the LOI, the letter of intent, non-binding letter of intent that we hope we can sign, get permission to sign this evening as we ask questions and understand what it means, that you'll hear during that process an opportunity to come back out for community engagement. And we want you to do that, plus we want you to bring 5 friends with you so that we can get a real good feel for what the community wants to see on that site as we move forward with planning. So, Mr. Phillips, I'm going to turn it over to you for a brief introduction, and then I think you'll introduce some of the team that's going to step us through the conversation.
Certainly will, Mr. Mayor. Again, welcome to the members of the public and members of the proposed development team. I think I'd like to start by just giving a little bit of a quick update. I think most of you know how we got here, so I won't go back to the beginning of this project. I think I would like to start by saying that the demolition and the environmental abatement is complete. So we're really been pleased with that process. Hoping to get something moving in terms of a development plan soon. If not, we do make some plans to maybe help screen the site if this is going to take a while, so we don't have to look at the undeveloped lot. But anyway, been real pleased with that particular part of the project. Obviously, as you recall, back up about a year plus when the city of Newnan engaged Nelson Worldwide to prepare a concept and a master plan. I know we had some community input, stakeholder inputs, and we come up with a pretty high level concept plan. But we struggled a little bit to put numbers to paper, to determine whether that was feasible. And so what this body decided to do was, while we're going through that due diligence and trying to determine what the final product should or should not be on the site, it would be best to select a development team to go through that exercise with the city and with the community. So we put out that RFQ. We had 3 development firms respond to the RFQ. Had one of the development firms withdraw their name from consideration prior to the proposals or the presentations to City Council. So we had a team of Sagestone and a team from Fides Development that each presented to this particular body. And before a decision was made from this body on one of those 2 firms, those 2 firms decided they wanted to actually combine and approach this project as a joint team effort. So they asked for time to be able to put together their legal structure and put together their team. And that's where we're at tonight. We're going to be hearing tonight from the combined teams from Sagestone and Fides. What we're going to be hearing tonight is the roles and that each of the team players are going to play, who's going to be involved in what aspects. We're going to hear about the process for their ideas, I should say, for community engagement. Going to hear a little bit about their proposed schedule, the deliverables, and like you said, the LOI is basically what we're after, is to get authorization for the mayor to actually sign that LOI so that we can start that process. What we're not going to hear tonight is we're proposing XYZ uses. That's something that's going to actually come out of this process. So I know a lot of people have asked about what the use is going to be. And I'm asking people to be patient, and that's what's going to be determined throughout this process. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Dave Dublinski. You may remember Dave. He was actually presenting on behalf of Sagestone at the last meeting. So here tonight is representing the joint partnership. So welcome, Dave. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you, council members, Mayor Brady.
Yes, sir.
Constituents, and welcome to the public. I think you've said a lot already. the team was, once we got together with Mallory Evans and Fide's team, we decided that it was better to tackle this project together. There's a good mix of local and kind of not from Noonan participants within this project. I would say our team was a little bit more balanced in terms of the local participants, and the Fides and Mallory and Evans team was a little bit more outside of Noonan. So we decided it was a better approach to make sure that we were balanced in terms of the representation, but also just the combined horsepower. And so, with that, we decided to form a joint venture. It really became a 50-50 balanced joint venture between us and Mallory and Evans and Fide's team. And so if you look, this is kind of a busy slide, but we tried to fit it all in one slide. Really, there's an executive committee that's been formed. There's 4 members of the executive committee. Myself, Johnny Dixon from Mallory and Evans, Doug Davidson from Fides Development, and Miller Choate from Packard Capital / Choate Construction. And so just as a way of history reminder, Doug Davidson is a managing principal of New South Construction, Miller Choate of Choate Construction. In my opinion, 2 of the best construction firms in the Southeast, and particularly in Atlanta. Johnny Dixon, Mallory and Evans, very accomplished developer, and myself, Dave Dublinski. For the project, we designated Josh Magaro as our kind of lead project manager. We want to make sure that everyone had a direct point of contact that was available, 24/7 to answer questions, both from the public and our public partners within, the council. We've engaged Nelson Worldwide, and particularly Lamar Wakefield from now Nelson Worldwide, formerly Wakefield Beasley, to kind of head and continue the work that he's already done on the planning and community engagement. Our view of this project is that the magic happens as soon as we start to get to work during the planning phase. Once it gets to the execution, we feel very confident. And so we want to make sure that we had a world-class team that was experienced in listening to the public concerns, the public desires, and also balancing that with a project that is economically feasible. So, the goal for us still remains the same, to deliver the highest and best use that balances the public interest and the private development interest as well. And it is not the easiest thing to do all the time, because, development is an art. It really is. And there's a science component to it where you follow the data and use the data to inform the design. But we want to make sure that we have the right team that's been experienced in working and worked successfully together in the past. I will tell you that the team at this point is pretty flexible. So like this process, through the due diligence process, we're going to remain flexible in terms of the staffing. And so if there's a personality fit that's better for the project, better for the community, we're willing. This is just part of the roster. When I started to put it on paper, it was actually kind of scary in terms of the amount of resources that we had. And so we had to have a day one team, and this is kind of the day one team. And so you'll see that there's still good representation from the local community. We've got great financial sponsorship between Fides Development and Packard Capital and ourselves, and Johnny Dixon and myself. So if we can determine a project that is economically feasible and works for everyone, the capital is not the issue. And we are dealing with unprecedented times in terms of whether it's inflation, interest rate hikes. And so the challenges that we had just 3 to 6 months ago are even more present. So we're excited to get started in the work. We're excited to get through this diligence process. We try to design a process with our local partners that provided off-ramps for both parties, meaning it's still a little bit of a dating phase, right? And so we want to make sure that we give you the opportunity for us to prove ourselves through the process. So with that, I'm going to introduce Josh. Josh will kind of walk you through the process a little bit, and then Lamar can walk you through a little bit of the community engagement in terms of how we plan to approach that over the course of the next 90 to 120 days.
Thank you.
Good evening, Josh Magaro, project manager for the project team. Thank you. Council members, mayor, everyone from the city, pleasure to see everyone today. Today I'll try to cover a little bit to the process of what we hope to achieve during what we're calling the due diligence phase of the project. And that is, as David explained, more of a fact-finding, information-finding phase for the development, really siloed into 2 main buckets. First and foremost, community engagement, which Lamar will dive into in a little more detail about how that may be structured. And then also through third-party feasibility reports, whether through market analysis, financial analysis, and otherwise. And so Up top, you'll see this somewhat reads left to right, kind of top to bottom. And instead of hitting each one of these, which you can kind of follow on your own, I'll try to put them into about eight different lines here and talk through those. First and foremost, again, conducting community engagement and the market research to help frame the final vision of the product. Everyone in this room will be a part of that and help put a fingerprint on what that final product looks like. Conducting preliminary site inspections and just other basic field work. Of course, the environmental, the soil abatement's been done. A lot of that work has been done up front by the city, but again, there will be on-site kind of physical site inspections and other field work required. Development of an initial concept plan to define the general uses, layout, and the scale of the overall project. Development of an initial financial pro forma based on that concept plan, including a preliminary construction budget. And of course, as David mentioned, between Doug and Millard, we've got two of, some of the finest resources in the Southeast from the construction side. And we'll use those to continue to determine and refine the feasibility of the project. We'll identify, through the identification of and consultation with leadership of the various departments of the city, agencies and authorities who have oversight, inclusive of the Community Improvement District, expected to participate in the design, planning, acquisition, and or implementation of the private and public sectors elements of the project. Creation of a major project review and implementation team, most likely led by the city, that will be comprised of senior representatives of these foregoing city managed departments and groups. And set, of course, of regular meetings through, to take on issue resolution and report framework for the project. Of course, selection of the final design team. We've got Lamar here, who's the best at what he does. There will be a team of engineers, consultants, intermediaries, and other professionals we'll have to bring together to pull off what we hope to be a world-class project. And then, of course, just final concurrence of the project's feasibility, and ultimately what we hope is an adoption of the development agreement with the City of Noonan.
And we had discussed that 90-day period for the due diligence, and there was some discussion about that being too short a period of time.
Like a lot of us are seeing, you walk into restaurants, they're short-staffed. The professional world is the same. Lead times have continued to drag out. And most importantly for us, we don't want to cut short the fact-finding information, which is what this due diligence phase is all about. We want to allow time for the community engagement. We don't want to rush it. We want to allow time to make sure the market reports from the third-party groups are done in a manner that's not done in haste and, in fact, is done in more detail than not. And that's why we asked for the additional 30 days.
Plus, the end of the 90-day period would be right at the end of November and starting the holiday season, which is, we all know is difficult. So
Sir.
the 120 days for council's information has been changed to 120 days. Any other questions of council, Josh? Okay, thank you very much.
Of course. That I'll pass it to Lamar to maybe speak more detail about its community engagement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. It's Lamar Wakefield, Nelson Worldwide. As mentioned earlier, we were hired by the city to help plan the Caldwell Tank site a little over a year ago. And as you guys recall, we did a social media questionnaire that went out to the public that was amazingly well received and got a lot of response. But to do a true community engagement, we really need to do a series of meetings. They all need to be in person. We would do generally a neutral, non-government location. We would target certain community groups, not only neighborhood HOAs and in some cases the development authority, but the general public at each of these meetings. We want to solicit information on all the components that we want to put in the project. That just doesn't mean the uses necessarily, but it does mean the uses, but the massing, the scale, the connectivity to the main street downtown. How do we complement what's happening in great downtown Noonan? It's amazing. How do we complement that through proper connectivity? And then I'll get with this team And one of the differences between me as an architect and some of the other guys, and these guys know it, is I took a deep dive in underwriting 25 years ago because I wanted to understand what my clients' goals were, whether they're long-term holders or selling property, or how that was going to work at the end of the project. So we get to a point where there's an economic and a feasibility for an underwriting for the projects as we look at each of the uses. So that will also be part of our process here. So we're really excited to be part of the community engagement team. I told Mayor Brady that I would personally lead this, and I will. And so these meetings will be convenient, so whatever that means, 6 o'clock or 6:30, in a public sector. So we'll engage, we'll listen, we'll pass everything along to this development team, and we'll report back promptly to everybody, and love to answer any questions anybody might have about the community engagement side of it, but it needs to be more this time than a social media representation. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No, thanks. Anyone else from the team? Mr. Phillips?
Mr. Mayor and Council, let me just say a few things. My family bought property in Coweta County back in 1970. I'm Doug Davidson.
Thank you.
And I'm principal of FIDES Development, and I'm also chairman of New South Construction Company. And back in 1960, my family bought property here. My grandparents lived here. My parents lived here, and my parents have passed away, so I'm in the process of moving to the area. Back in 1990, when I started New South Construction, my first two clients were Delta Airlines and Coweta County. We did the Coweta County Jail. I'm proud to say that both are still our clients today. We're about to do the addition at the Coweta County Jail. We're doing work for the city of Noonan. So I just want to present just a testimony of trust for our team. As I transition out of my position at New South, I want to do neat things and help develop, things that enhance the communities. And that'll be done by the trust you have in our team and from the collaboration we have from the whole community. So I just want to share my word to the commission and mayor and city staff. As we've done in other projects here, we will do what we say we're going to do. So we appreciate your time today.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Ms. Phillips, there is some cost to the LOI. Could you go over that with us, please?
Yes. I think it's important to first understand the way the LOI has been drafted, letter of intent, and Mr. Dublinski hit on this. It's a non-committal contract that either side has the ability to walk away from during the due diligence. But since there is a substantial amount of work on behalf of the team to determine, to get to that go or no-go decision, like I said, market analysis, engineering, designers, a lot of commitment from the team. They originally had asked for $60,000, I believe, or 65?
65.
65. That has since been amended because we asked for additional resources on the team to amount not to exceed 75,000. So we certainly think that's a fair number for a 125-day period. At the end of the 125-day period, if this particular body decides not to move forward with the development agreement, we certainly have another.
Well, the other important component to that is that we own all of that material.
Yes, it is in the LOI that we own the documents, the information.
That's right.
That is correct.
There's not their property at the end of,
That
if
is
we
correct.
don't move, got it.
Material produced.
That's right.
That is right.
It's also important to recognize that's not designed for the development team. That's all for third-party engineering and reports and things like that. So it's all third-party resources, nothing that is, our work is free of charge until we get to a development agreement.
Any questions from council?
I do.
Okay.
I know you're talking about the flexibility of this team at this point. At what point and what is your process in selecting all of the team members that will be involved?
So.
And you need to come to the mic, please.
Mike can't pick you up yet.
No, I understand. Through the feasibility and really the programming, once we get to a defined program, we're going to make sure that we select the architects and the interior designers that match the profile of the project. And so, depending on, it's not only based on, who the resources is, but it's also the availability of those resources. What we've been contending with, and part of the reason for the extension of time, is that a lot of resources are very consumed right now and are backed up in terms of their backlog. So we want to make sure that we've got a resource that can be dedicated, and just like anything, it's not necessarily the firm, it's the individual or the team that gets assigned to the project. And through the creative process with Nelson Worldwide, I think we've got flexibility to bring in other design engineers for certain subcomponents. Whether we decide it's a hospitality use, a residential use, a commercial use, a retail use, we want to make sure that we've got the best product, that we deliver the best engineering solution for what we've decided to build. And so the same thing would apply on the construction side, because it's not always a cost decision, right? It's a quality decision, it's an availability decision. It's all those types of factors that weigh into those decisions that we make.
Okay, so is there a component in this that allows the council to weigh in on who those are?
Yeah, I mean, our plan as one of our final deliverables is to present the team that we propose for the execution. I don't know if we actually got to this thing's not
Can't see
working.
that far.
So, yeah. So, as one of the final deliverables, we will propose the team that we think is the best team for the job, right? And that's really our job as developers. We're risk managers and we're team builders, right? So we try to get the best team to deliver the lowest risk project with the highest return, both for the private and the public stakeholders. And through this process, as the design will inform some of those decisions on the selection of the team. We have locked in on, some of the planning resources at this point, but there's still a lot of work to be done because we're just taking this through concept at this point. There's an SD phase, there's a DD phase, there's a CD phase, as you well know. And oftentimes we've teamed up with other architects to make sure that we've got good local representation as well. And I've done projects that are different in scale. So depending on what this project becomes, it's a difficult question to answer right now because there's so many different, ways this can head.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm getting at, because been excited about this project for a long time and still very excited about it, but I was very much so leaning towards, frankly, your team when this all started, and I'll tell you why, so that we don't lose this in the process of figuring out who things are. One, I really thought the community engagement was really exceptional. I had people engaged, calling, saying, hey, I like this and I like that. And that kind of response, we haven't gotten in a long time about something. So I thought that was very indicative of the team that was engaging the public. And I think we don't want to lose that in this process. And number two, the architectural details. As you know, that's what I studied at Georgia Tech and practiced for a little bit. And I don't believe that this is the project where you design something that could fit anywhere USA.
Yeah.
We want something that is classically proportioned, something that is done very well, and I don't think you can just do this dusting off your classical proportion skills. You need to find somebody that's doing that every day, all day, in order to get it right. And that is what your team brought to the table. And I definitely do not want to lose that, because at the end of the day, this is a generational project. We want good community engagement, and we want a spectacular architectural product.
Nope, we hear you loud and clear. And I think at least our mission from the beginning has not changed. We've just provided, in our opinion, we have now more horsepower. But as far as from a design vision perspective, making sure that we deliver a project that's world-class but also fits and is, like you said, timeless, is important to us. And from a community engagement perspective, all the team members that we presented before are still part of the team. And so they will be actively involved in the community engagement and the planning process. And so we do believe in listening to the constituents, listening to the public, taking that advice, and then, showing you the results. So I can tell you that there's no change on our side. If you look, Mitch, Bill, and Randy are still listed as team members on the team and will be active in the development.
And my fangirling architecture team is there too, right?
Yeah, no, we're looking at Satil and historical concepts, and but we are leaning into Lamar's team to kind of help us guide those decisions. Once we get to that point. And again, we've teamed architects together before and been very successful at doing it. Sometimes we do it where one architecture firm will take the exterior, another firm will take the interiors and, work through the detailed drawings. And so we've done that on other projects very successfully where we've had the same concerns.
Okay.
Anyone? So,
Yes.
okay. All right. Mr. Alexander?
Dave, I feel confident that y'all are going to give the best product and the highest quality with your team. I've seen a lot of y'all's work, and y'all really do a great job. So we're putting this trust in you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone? Okay, so as Mr. Phillips said, unless there's some other comment or anyone else from the team needs to present? Don't want to cut anybody short? Okay. As Mr. Phillips said at the beginning of the meeting, what we're looking for coming out of this is authorization for me to sign the LOI. So if there is a motion, it is
Moved.
Second.
motion is second. Mr. Sears.
My understanding, the LOI before you has been revised, so it needs to
That's
be
right. And-
as revised. And I have had no comments from the developer, so I don't know if the developer had any revisions or not.
Yeah, it was my understanding
So I,
we
so
weren't gonna vote tonight.
moved as revised.
Mr. S- yeah, to
Yeah,
answer
my
that,
understanding was
the
we're
revision
gonna
of the due diligence time period to 120 days and the cost from 65,000 to a number of 70, not to exceed 75,000. Other than that, we haven't received comment. They were accepting of our red lines.
Okay.
So the
Motion to the amended
And second.
numbers.
What we all need to remember, and I'm sure Ms. Jenkins does, is this is a non-binding agreement. This gets us to move forward in the process. Mr. Sears?
Well, it's potentially binding for, if it's terminated prior to the end of the period, the city will be responsible for
For the
the
funds.
expenditures.
Yes,
of the
we all
project.
understand
Yeah.
that.
So
Everybody
that part of
understands
it, so that's why the agreement is changed to a due diligence agreement and then the LOI to develop the development agreement. So the city is committing $75,000 to the due
120 days.
diligence. Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Yeah, it was my understanding that we weren't gonna vote tonight. That's why it wasn't in the LOI wasn't in the agenda. I mean, that's what I thought, is that this was just to discuss this team part and that we'd come back to the LOI once it was completely done.
Did anybody ever have an understanding that we weren't going to vote on anything tonight?
No.
No,
Fully understand her question.
If you'll restate your question.
I was saying that I thought that we were not going to vote on the LOI, and that is why the agenda item was just a discussion as opposed to the LOI being on the agenda.
I was under the opinion that we had to get started, and as soon as we approved it, as far as the LOI, that they would actually be engaged and we'd be in a contract. That's my understanding.
That was my understanding as well, is that we weren't just coming here together just to have another chit chat, but we were actually going to do something to move forward. So that was my understanding.
Well, the email we got said the agreement document will not be included in the agenda packet for August 30th, 2022 special call meeting because the developer and city have yet to complete and review and accept all edits.
That's honestly, that's how I took it also. I didn't realize we were voting tonight because I thought it was just the initial get it, make sure it's all, all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and everything's good, but. And I understand it's non-binding, I
We were
get
going to
that.
vote on it.
Well, I'm telling you what it said in black and white when they sent it to us.
Okay. This is an extremely important project for the city. Everybody knows that. I don't think it's the wisest decision to make, to vote on something where at least two of our members don't feel comfortable with a vote tonight. So I would ask, who made the motion?
I did. I'll withdraw.
Withdraw, will you withdraw the second?
Yeah.
All right, so, and Mr. Phillips, will you put this on our agenda for our first meeting in September?
We'll clean up all of the edits and comments and have a final form.
Right, we'll have it on that will be our first meeting in September, which is the second Tuesday at 2:30. I don't remember the date. Escapes me. 13th. So it'll be on that agenda. Okay, so for the evening, that ends our regular agenda, and I'll ask Mayor Pro Tem DeBose to take us into executive session for legal.
I move that we now enter into closed session allowed by OCGA 5014-4 and pursuant to advice by the city attorney for the purpose of discussing legal matters. And that we, in open session, adopt a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor or presiding officer to execute an affidavit in compliance with OCGA 5014-4, and that this body ratify the actions of the council taken in closed session and confirm that the subject matters of the closed session were within exceptions permitted by the open meetings law.
Second.
Motion is second. We go into executive session for legal. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you for being here tonight, ladies and gentlemen.